YouTube, how's it going? Welcome to Trip Boomer's Tech-Bodge Emporium. I am your host, Trip Boomer, as always. In this one, in a little bit of a follow-up to the video yesterday on the Doom Eternal optimized settings, I noticed how close DLSS Quality was to native, but it looked cleaner, it looked crisper in that small bit of footage. So I thought I wanted to investigate it a little bit further. I thought I'd take you along with me. So what we're going to do is I've got a few verses set up. We're going to have a look at them together. Now it's going to be it's a longer form video, this one, so I'm going to have it chaptered up, so feel free to jump to whichever comparison you want to check out the most, what you're most interested in. If not, watch the whole video. I'm going to waffle through the whole thing. I will try and waffle in a certain way that each chapter section I'm almost restarting, but it will be following on. We'll go as we go. But first up, we're going to be having a look at, because now the thing is, when I was looking at that, I thought to myself, I was like, if DLSS Quality looks that sharp in comparison to native, what if you use the app to force DLAA? Because that's not actually an option in the game. So what I've done is I've forced DLAA, but the transfer model. I didn't really bother with the CNN model on the DLAA. So first up, we're going to have native versus DLAA transformer model. Then we've got the DLSS Quality, but it's the CNN model versus the transformer model, so we can see the differences there. Then we've got native versus the CNN model at DLSS Quality, and native versus the transformer model at DLSS Quality. So we'll be able to see the differences between each one. I will say that DLAA is easily the cleanest way to play the game. But we'll get into. But it does come with its own caveats. It's not perfect, and there's a good argument for the CNN model in this particular game. There's certainly a good argument for that, and it's not just on FPS. That being said, should we have a look at the footage? We'll go through it and we'll see how they compare. Yeah.
I can subscribe. Thank you.
So first up, we've got native on the left and the DLAA, but the transformer model on the right. And as you can see, the first thing is that it is noticeably cleaner on the DLAA side. Obviously, the frame rate is an impact. There's a good 20 odd FPS that you're losing by putting DLAA on for starters, so that's not good. However, if you've got like a 3080, anything with sort of like 10 gigs or up and of like 3080 and above, you could easily get away with this transformer model on DLAA and have a high refresh rate at 1440p with my optimized settings here. But even on a 3060, it doesn't actually dip any lower than what I think it might drop down into about 65 or something. So it stays above 60 FPS. So all of the options here are an option. However, there are a couple of things that I think that the transformer model does take away from the whole thing. Like during this cutscene here, you should be able to see that hopefully YouTube compression is going to be nice to me on this one and we can actually properly check it. But you can see that the colours, the depth of the colours on the DLAA side are somewhat washed out. They're a little bit less, I don't know, less warm, I suppose. I think they're warmer colours on the native version. And transformer model seems to wash quite a lot of that out. Also, I've noticed that it seems to lose some of the shading almost. However, it is the crispest of all the images. It is definitely the cleanest look to all of these. So this is fundamentally an option for a 3060 or up. I mean, no one wants to play the game at 60 FPS, but then again, half the people that have played this game have played it at 60 FPS or lower because they've done it on a console. This is next level in comparison to console gameplay. So the numbers on both these sides, like if the numbers were only, because this level is not very intensive, it's not an extremely intensive level, it's a Sentinel Prime level. It is literally just a walkthrough and then a boss fight. That's pretty much it. It's quite a short level, that's why I've used it, so that I can repeat it. It's quite linear and it's really quite shortly done. But I will say that over on the DLAA side, it seems a lot brighter, and it's sharper, but it also seems a lot brighter. It's almost, I feel like it's taking away from some of the design choices of the game. I feel like I don't know, it feels like it's not quite as heavily shaded as the original version. Dark corners seem darker on the native version, but yeah, everything seems a lot brighter over on the DLSS version, well, DLAA at the minute. However, as I said before, if you've got the horsepower for it, why not? I mean, it's viable because it's above 60 FPS on a 3060, but as I said, unfortunately to my 3060 Ti bros and to my 3070 bros and 2080 bros and 4060 bros and 4060 Ti 8GB edition bros, unfortunately none of your cards are going to be able to run my settings because they're all above 8GB. However, the CNN model with DLSS that I actually throw down in the previous video as my recommended, there's probably a few little tweaks that you can make to drop that just underneath the 8GB, because you only got to find sort of like 800 meg or something at times, like, but it is constantly above 8GB, so you're probably going to have problems with that, unfortunately. But this is at 1440p, and you know 9GB at 1440p is about what this game wants to run with these settings. But as you can see here, the image, like I said, the image looks cleaner on the DLAA side, but it's almost losing some of the depth to the image because it seems to be like holding back on some of the shading, like it's almost losing some of the shading during the process. So and there seems to be a slight change in the color palette, as you can see here on the maker there. Did you see that on the maker? There's a lot brighter, and you can see on his face here there's a lot more shaded over on the native side than it is on DLSS. It shows a lot in this guy's face. I know it's a little bit off mark, but you can see it. You can see that even the Doom guy here is brighter. I know they're both in white, but like I said, there's an extra crispness that comes from the Transformer model, but it does seem to wash away some of the color and wash away some of the shading a little bit. That's what I'm taking from this. And I mean, this is just AA, and let's be honest, the differences between these two, yes, over on DLAA side, I'm not gonna lie, when it comes down to like crispness, the cleanness of all the lines and stuff on the image, the Transformer model, it's like stepping up a resolution. It's almost like going from 1440p to 4K without leaving 1440p. But the thing is, the things that it takes away from the game, it's like do you really want to lose that much of it? Don't get me wrong, all of the DLSS solutions wash the game out a little bit when it comes to colours and a little bit of the sort of like the depth of the shading and stuff. There's something that does get lost. So yes, froggy. That is something that does happen. However, you're mistaken, because you have said that DLSS is always washed out. There's always the colours this, the colours that, and you've said you in your eyes the transformer model has fixed that issue. I would say it certainly in this title, it's made that issue worse, which you will see coming up. But again, remember, this is native on the left, DLAA transformer model on the right. So you're going to lose 20 to 25 FPS choosing the DLAA transfer model over just native, which I think uses TAA. So it like I said, I wouldn't bother doing this unless I had, you know, a 3080 or higher. 3080, 4070, 4070 Super. Yeah, throw on the transfer model. You may as well use my settings, throw on the transfer model, force it to play at DLAA and have like the sharpest look. That's if you want the cleanest look. But there's something about the transfer model in this game that's, yes, it's cleaner, yes, it's sharper, but it's almost clinical clean, if you get me. Like, it's washed out a lot of the sort of colour and somewhat depth. Like, there's going to be a point at the end of here where once this guy gets taken out completely, like, these aren't perfectly matched up. I did better. There are points where you might think that the game is skipping, but it's not. It's just where I've had to link these up, and as you'll see as we go through the video, I get better at it. But this is the first one up. So, like I said, they both look awesome. This game is freaking awesome. The fact that this game is as old as it is, yeah, is ridiculous. There are games that are getting released now calling themselves AAA that don't look as good as this freaking game. Let's be honest. And yeah, I know I should have lined the images up a little bit more central. I'll do it, just not for this video. It's already been done. But yes, I will try and make things a bit more central so you get in the middle of the video in future. This was more sort of, well, the thing is, a lot of the complaints when it comes to DLSS and stuff has always been background. It's never been the stuff in the foreground. The stuff in the foreground's always been sharp as anything. Everyone's always complained about the background stuff, so we're kind of looking at that kind of thing anyway. But both versions look awesome. I don't think you would be disappointed choosing either of the models or going with native DLAA or either of the models at DLSS Quality. As I said, I've not tried forcing DLAA with the CNN model, but going with what everything else is showing, I would say it probably takes about 5 FPS, 5 to 10 FPS off native score, and probably looks around about the same, maybe a tiny bit sharper to native. So like, but for me, the CNN model with DLSS Quality, which you'll see soon, looks freaking awesome in this game. And there's so little differences between them that it's almost pointless losing the FPS, if you get me. I mean, at this precise moment, as you'll see near the end of the video, at this precise moment, DLSS Quality with the transformer model gets you very close to native FPS. So to use a transformer model, you're practically using the transformer model. You see how pinker it is over on the DLSS version here. Sorry, I cut what I was saying, but you see how pinker it is in the flesh. in comparison. It just feels redder and a bit more bloodier on the native side than it does on the Transformer model here. You can see again the shading in his face before it blew his head off. So yeah, there's something. It's very crisp. Like I said before, yeah, the Transformer model here, like I said, you can see it here. It is cleaner. It is developing a cleaner image. It is giving a sharper image. But it does take stuff away, and I feel like that shading and sort of like the depth of color is one of those things. Right, now we have the CNN model DLSS Quality on the left and the transfer model DLSS Quality on the right. So now you can see these two upscales compared to each other. And as you can see, what I'm seeing is that the CNN model, even though the transfer model is cleaner, it is a crisper image, the CNN model seems to keep a bit more of that sort of, you know, the color. It doesn't seem to wash out the color quite as heavily as the transfer model does, and it doesn't see and you know, it seems to have that, which allows it to have that depth, and it seems to have a bit more of that shading. I don't know if you noticed there on his arm and stuff. His arm has a bit more of a flashy color tone to it. But frame rate wise, it's a no-brainer. If you're looking for more FPS, you go with the CNN model, you know. But as you can see on the skull there, it still has that. It seems to handle the shade better. Like you'll see in this clip here, it looks richer on the CNN model, which is on the left here. It looks richer than it does on the transfer model. And you see the purples on his dress here. See how the purple on the CNN model is a bit more reddish, whereas the purple over on the transfer model is a bit more bluish. It's like it's like there's a warmer color palette to the CNN model than there is to the transfer model, and I think that's what's sort of like kicking me here on just straight suggesting the transfer model. I think it's just in this particular title, the transfer model is on a different color palette, and it's working against it here, you know. Whereas it is a sharper image, I feel like the CNN model has managed to keep hold of that sort of gritty depth to the game more in this particular situation. So yes, Froggy, like I said, this yes, there is definitely a washed outness to using DLSS, but I think all upscalers have a bit of a wash outness to them when they come to the colors and stuff, and some of the shading, it just doesn't replicate it. So yeah, there is side notes to stuff like that, but if you look at beyond just sharpness, I feel that the CNN model here holds on to more of that gritty darkness to the game than the transfer model does. So what do you consider a better image? Is it that it's sharper, or is it that it sticks closer to the design choices of the developers? Because in my eyes, the way I'm looking at it, in my eyes, the CNN model here is holding that gritty darkness that the devs were going for better than the transfer model is. It just seems with the transfer model, it just seems a lot more sort of flattish, because it hasn't got that. It seems to have lost some of its shading to the image, and it's definitely lost some depth in color. Like the color definitely looks richer on the CNN side here than it does on the transfer side. I really hope this is going to show up through the YouTube compression. I really hope this is going to show up. The last video was freaking awesome. I literally could pause the gods of YouTube compression were really, really nice to me on that particular video, because you can literally pause that video and you can see that one is crisper than the other. But again, here, as you can see, like in the depth, it's brighter. It's like a lighter. It's almost like the CNN model has like an orangey tone to it, whereas the transfer model has a more of a yellowy tone to it, and it shows up in these greens. Can you see the slight change in colour? That it's more a yellowy green over on the transfer model. You see the shading in his face; it seems a bit brighter, and I don't know. It just seems to take away some of the shading and some of the colour. It seems to wash it away. You can see in the maker here. See that how she's lighter over on that side? And you see the shading around his face here. You can see it here very, very clearly. The CNN model looks a lot more similar to the native model that was before it, and over on the transfer model you can see a lot of that shading around his face has been washed out. You can see in the Doomslayer's arm here, the colour's a lot richer over on the CNN model. So there's caveats. See, look at that shield. I think the CNN model looks better because it has more shading to it. It seems to have more shading to it anyway. So I'm still well in the paddock of the CNN model when it comes to this game. Even after looking back at this, I mean, it's continuously at a higher FPS. So you're getting that performance that you were looking for, putting upscaling on. So you get that performance from it, and yeah, okay, the transfer model might actually have some cleaner lines in it, but the atmosphere seems to the CNN model seems to have held on to the atmosphere of it a lot better. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts, I suppose, but as you can see here, both models handle the game perfectly fine. The numbers on both sides of the equation are more than enough for this title. It is a single player title. It is, you know, it's just a one-player game. So you don't have to worry about that competitiveness on the side. However, with Doom Eternal, it's a very fast-paced single-player game, and having that higher refresh rate is a nice thing. You know, you can have moments where you've got like 10 demons trying to kill you at the exact same time, and at 60 FPS, that can be a little bit muddling for your PC to produce without tears and it looking a little muddled and stuff. So having that high refresh rate is definitely a welcome feature when it comes to a game like Doom Eternal. That being said, you could play with the lower FPS. I mean, I could play the game with the DLAA transfer model frame rates, and they're the lowest here. They're like average, 80s, dips into the 65s, but I would choose to play with the CNN model here, which is averages of 130. Now, again, like I said, this is not a heavily intensive level in any way, shape or form. You'll see in the last video how that shows more the sort of like reaches of what is expected, what you're expected to get off the system with those numbers. What you should expect to get off the system. Basically, the last video is a better showing of the lows and highs of what you expect to see as an FPS count in this game with those settings. These settings are still, in my eyes, the best way to play this game. And if you've got a 3060, why not? 120 FPS all the time, almost all the time, that's fine. With full RT, well, full RT reflections, they look amazing. Yeah, and you need to remember, it's not just like reflections in windows, it's not just reflections in your gun. There's reflections all over the floors, there's added features. They literally went around the map and added extra bits of blood, panels in the walls and in the floors that also add extra RT reflections to everything. There's quite a lot going on when it comes to the reflections, but as you can see here, both sides handle it faultlessly. The frame time is flat as anything, regardless of what model you're using, regardless of whether you're playing this game native or whether you're playing this game with upscaling. You've got a flat frame time regardless. So as you can see here, again, you can see how on his flesh on the CNN model it just seems a bit more bloody and a bit more red. Like it just seems a little bit more washed out over on the transfer side. Not by a huge amount, but enough for me to notice. So, and again, you can see even at a distance, you can see the shading's better on the CNN model than it is on the transfer model. So it's what you want. If you're going to go DLSS, me personally, I would suggest just sticking with the CNN model and not bothering with the transfer model. But if you desire that extra little bit of crispness and you don't mind that it washes the color out a little bit and it changes, and you lose a bit more shading and stuff, like, then you go ahead. Right, so coming into this now, we have got native on the left and the CNN DLSS Quality on the right. So we get to see what the actual uplift from the CNN model is now, and we'll get to see these two compared next to each other, seeing as everyone says that DLSS has always been trash until this new model. Now the funny thing here is that now that the CNN model is sat up against native, it looks a little washed out. But we know that it's not as washed out as the transfer model, because when they're sat next to each other, the transfer model one looks real washed out. So the CNN model is definitely closer to native when it comes to the depth of the shading and the vibrancy of the colors and just the general sort of like art design of the game from the devs. See, as you're coming through here now, you'll see it that even though the right hand screen is not as rich as the native on the left here, it's a lot closer than the two were when it was the DLAA and the native. So for me,
huge guts.
I'm still choosing the CNN. I can see quite clearly that there is some of that depth lost from the image because of the shading. And I can see quite clearly that the colors are slightly different because obviously the DLSS palette is just using a different palette as such. However, I do still believe that it's a lot closer to what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to be colored than it is on the transfer model. And seeing the CNN model next to native right here just like really just shows just how well DLSS Quality, the older model, actually holds up against native in this game. Because look, I have to pixel peep to see the differences in any of these. Like, I have to pixel peep to see the differences of either of the models in comparison to native in this game. So whether it's the CNN model, whether it's the transfer model, they are both extremely good. And in this game, like I said, I have to pixel peep to see the difference. Like, I keep getting told that DLSS has always been trash. So apparently this is completely trash and it looks nothing like the original version. they're really close. And more FPS. Like, they're really close. Again, like I said, the CNN model, DLSS in itself, any of the upscaling in itself is sort of washing the colour out a tiny bit and is losing a level of that depth in the shadows. There is a loss there. I can see it, but it's far less on this CNN model than it is on the transfer model. Like, in my eyes, I'm still standing my ground. I still think DLSS Quality with the CNN model is one of the better ways to play this game. You can play it natively. If you've got the horsepower to play it natively, don't put DLSS on. You know, I'm only using the DLSS Quality for extra FPS. That's the only reason. I'm not doing it to improve the image or make it look better than native. That's not the intention.
Make a fine addition to the
And this whole video here is purely because of how close, how much sharper the DLSS Quality transfer model looked to native in the last video. I had to look back at it. I had to make a decision, and like I said here, you can see here the shading, the color. It's not as deep as it is on native, but it's still there. Like the grittiness in him, in the priest, the grittiness in the priest here is still there. Like, it's not as prominent, but it's still there, and the color in his skin there is a lot closer between these two than it is between native and any of the transfer models. Even the shield coming out, you can still see that obviously there's some of it's been lost, some of that color's been washed out a little bit, but it's very, very slight. So I still stand that this is the best version to play the game on, which is my optimized settings with the CNN model at DLSS Quality, especially if you're on a 3060. If you're not on a 3060, if you're on something bigger, again, like I said, a 3080 or above, because you need that 10 gigs of VRAM to be able to run any of these settings, because as you can see there, we've got what the CNN model over here is literally at 8.6 gig, and native we're just shy of 9 gig. And this is quite a short game, so that can increase as game goes on, you know, it fluctuates. So you may struggle with an 8 gigabyte card with my settings, but I'm sure you owning an 8 gigabyte card, you're more than capable of optimizing that 600 meg out of the situation. That being said, this is the again, like I said, they both play so well, but you can't ignore the fact that the CNN model with DLSS Quality does run 20 to 30 FPS above native, and that is 15 to 25 FPS above 15 to 30 FPS above the transfer model. So it is running faster than all the others, and arguably looks, even though it's not as sharp, it arguably looks the closest to native out of all the options here. Out of transfer with DLAA, transfer with DLSS Quality, or DLSS Quality with the CNN model, out of all of those, the DLSS Quality with the CNN model, in my eyes, as you can see here, is the closest to native. It hasn't quite got that depth of native, but holy crap, it's close, you know? And as I said, the thing is, with the transfer model, I feel like it washes it out further. I feel that there's more depth and darkness in the CNN model than there is in the transfer model. even though the transfer model does in itself have a cleaner image. Like, the outlines around stuff are sharper, they are cleaner. But is it worth it? In my eyes, no. For this to be DLSS quality on the right, and for this to be native on the left, and them to be visually that close to each other, and you still get an extra, you're still constantly getting an extra 20 to 30 FPS. And, like, if anything, it flattens the frame time even further. I mean, don't get me wrong, the frame time is flat anyway, but if anything, it flattens it even further. Due to the fact that it's obviously it's upscaling from a low res, so it's got more frames to play with, so latency comes down as you got more frames. That being said, these, yeah, I'm sorry guys, but I'm standing firm. The CNN model is still the GOAT when it comes to Doom Eternal. Don't get me wrong, I am an avid supporter of the transfer model. I've used it in a couple of games. In Indiana Jones, which I will go through my recommended settings in that as well. Indiana Jones, I use the transfer model because it looks fucking awesome. But in this particular title, I think you're better sticking with the CNN model, you know. For the extra frame rate, the fact that it still manages to keep a lot more of the colour depth there, and it still manages to keep a lot more of the sort of like the design of the shading. Me personally, I would stick with the CNN model. But we have got coming up now, we have got the last two comparison coming up now is the native versus the transfer model, but with DLSS quality. So we started off this video with native versus the transfer model at DLAA. Now this is transfer model with DLSS quality. Now again, as I said, the image is significantly sharper on the transfer model, but it loses so much darkness and depth to the image. So a lot of the sort of like depth of the shading seems to be lost. Like it's almost like in an endeavor to sharpen the image, they've chosen to let go of some of those shading and chosen to wash out the colors a little bit to achieve those sharpnesses. Now, don't get me wrong, yeah, if you came off native and then you put on the transfer model, which is what I did earlier. I literally paid native and then I played with the transfer model, and as soon as I turned the transfer model on and I was playing with it, I was like, wow. Right, I was like, wow, this is like stepping up a resolution. It's that sort of difference in clarity. But as soon as I seen them side by side, I immediately seen what I'm seeing now, which is a lot more contrasty, warm depth to the image over on native, and a lot of that washed out and a lot more sort of like true white color palette over on the transfer model. Like I'm sure you guys are seeing this too. It you know, it's right in front of us. Again, we're in the same situation when it comes to the VRAM. You're gonna need 10 gigabytes or higher. So apologies to all you apologies to all the 8 gigabyte brethren. I'm sure you can find a way to tweak the settings so that you could use these settings, but unfortunately you're going to need 10 gigabytes or more to run these settings as they stand. I still stand that they are the best option and the best optimized settings so that you can run RT on any card really, like 3060 and up. you could probably run these settings on lower cards than the 3060 and the RTX setting, but not if you want 120 FPS or higher. If you're aiming for 120 FPS with this game, then these settings are definitely what you want. With DLSS quality on the CNN model, I would not switch over the transfer model. For me, it doesn't give enough. You can see here there are points where it doesn't give an improvement in FPS. There are points where it does give an improvement in FPS, but these two pretty much run basically the same FPS, whether you're native or whether you're on the transfer model at DLSS quality. They basically run it around about the same FPS. As I said, there are points where the native is actually running faster than the DLSS quality. So for you to choose DLSS quality on the transfer model, you're kind of losing quite a lot to gain a little bit of sharpness, because you gain a little bit of sharpness and it does look a cleaner image overall, but you lose some of the depth of the image because of the shading. You lose some of the depth of the image because of the colors being washed out for the transfer model. And on top of all that, you would be upscaling to basically anti-alias the image. You shouldn't need to upscale to anti-alias it. Like, those two things are two separate things, right? You shouldn't need to upscale to anti-alias something and keep the same sort of frame rates as native. Like, it sort of, for me, it goes against the grain to upscale something to have the same FPS. Like, regardless of how ever so slightly cleaner lines and text and stuff are going to be on the image, for you to be basically not gaining any FPS, then lose some depth to the image, lose some color to the image, just to use a transfer model. I don't know, that's not for me. Me personally, I still stand that the CNN model is the better of the upscalers for this game. As you can see, it's so washed out on the priest's face on the right hand side here, like so washed out. And I know you see that on on the CNN model, but it's nowhere near as much, to the point where you've seen that depth when we were putting those two together. And you can see how much whiter he is as a person. Go with it. How much more Caucasian he is in this. And look at these shields here. There's so much sort of darkness and depth to the shield on the native version, which, as I said, I feel the CNN model kind of holds on to that a bit better than the transfer model does. So I suppose it's down to what you really want out of the game. If you've got a 3080 or a 4070, or if you've got more than 10 gigs of VRAM and you're on a card that's a good 30% more powerful than mine, than this 3060, then you can choose any of these and you can have a great time. You may as well play native, to be honest. You'll have insane frame rate. So, but for me, the transfer model, whether it be DLAA or whether it be DLSS quality, it seems somewhat pointless when the CNN model looks so good and seems to hold a little bit more of that art design from the devs. It's like I said, for me it's a no-brainer. It doesn't take too much thinking to be like, yeah, all right. There's barely any difference visually, really, between these, except for the fact that the transfer model does create a sharper image, but also washes out the colors a lot more than the CNN model, and washes out a lot of the sort of like depth in shading that the CNN model keeps. So it's like, what do you want from your game? Do you want it to be super sharp and clean looking and very sort of like clinically clean and sharp? If so, go with the transfer model. If you're on a 3060, go with transfer on DLSS Quality. If you're on something like a 3080 or something, you could probably run that on with Forced DLAA and have the best time. But for me on this card, I DLAA dipping down into the 60s in Doom Eternal, it's not what I want from the game. I'm not saying it's unplayable, of course it's playable, but because of how fast-paced the game is, I feel like 60 FPS can kind of limit you a little bit. So if you want something clinical and clean, and you don't mind that it washes out the colour a little bit, and you don't mind that it washes some of that depth out of the image, then by all means switch over to transfer model, especially if you're not bothered by actually getting any real FPS improvement from upscaling. Go with the transfer model. But if you don't care about the frame rates that you're getting on the transfer model at DLSS Quality, for me, you may as well play the game natively and keep that depth and that richness of the colour. But if you want that slight more smoothness, you want that higher FPS, and you don't mind a slight wash out of the colours and a slight wash out of the shading to nowhere near the depth, then stick with the CNN model, because you get an extra 25 to 30 FPS off that over native, and it's totally worth it. Like I think the CNN model in this game looks absolutely freaking awesome, but I had to do this because for my own sanity, because I seen that I looked back at the video from earlier, and the fact that YouTube compression actually let it through to the point where I could pause the video and see that it was visibly clearer on the transfer model than it was on native. I was like, hang on, does the transfer model actually, does the DLSS Quality actually look better than native for once ever? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense of sharpness. No, in the sense of like game design and like depth and color. Like it definitely is pinker on the right hand side of the screen here, and that's the transfer model. So hopefully this video's helped. I've kind of waffled off a bit. It's probably going to be a lot of nonsense. We'll have to find out. But yeah, I'm hopefully YouTube compression is kind to us and lets this come through at the quality I intend it to, so that we can really so you guys can really see the differences between this model and native and the two models, so that you can actually have an affirmative answer. Because for me, a lot of the time I'm watching videos that don't have the quality for me to be able to see it myself, and I'm just basically taking other people's words on it. And a lot of the people that are commenting on this sort of stuff, they're commenting on this sort of stuff in the terms of they've played it, and then they've come out of the game and they've gone into the game with the other model, and then they've played it. And having these two in front of me and being able to see like the comparisons one to one has been like outstanding. Anyways, this has been a bit of a stretch of a video, but hopefully you like the content. If you do, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Love you, bye.